Okay, next up for cross-examination is are the convoy organizers.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner. Good morning, good afternoon again. Just became the afternoon. Superintendent Bernier, and good afternoon, everyone here and online. My name is Bath-Shéba Vandenberg, and I'm representing Freedom Corp and the Protestors. Mr. Commissioner, I have 25 minutes allocated, and there was some information that came about from this morning that requires me to ask a few more questions, and therefore I ask for leave for 5 additional minutes.
Okay, well, what I'd suggest is go ahead, assuming you're efficient and effective in your 25 minutes. I'll consider giving the 5. If you're not, I won't. How's that?
Sounds fair. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay.
Superintendent Bernier, you talked about CBRN units being chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. Was that the OPS CBRNE combined with RCMP?
That is correct.
Are you aware that the military unit, which is called Canadian Joint Incident Response Unit, which is part of CANOSCOM, assists RCMP in that capacity?
Perhaps they have agreements on certain types of events that they would become involved with that.
And so do you agree that this military CBRN capability unit may have been used during the protest after the Emergencies Act invocation to assist the RCMP?
I have no knowledge of that.
In your testimony yesterday, you mentioned that when you were assigned to the Service Command Center on February the 3rd, you noted that there were problems with OPS staffing. Is that right?
There were challenges in meeting the staffing needs.
Okay. And I also understand that OPS COVID-19 vaccine mandates took effect on February 1st. Is that right?
I don't have specific knowledge on that.
But they took effect around that date. Is that right?
There were specific ones that you want to refer to that I don't know what you're referring to, COVID-19 mandate.
The COVID-19 vaccination mandate, to be clear.
What was the change or that they went into place?
That anyone in the OPS force that did not take the COVID-19 vaccine would no longer be able to serve in the force.
You're talking about the internal
1st.
policies, not globally on that. You're talking about Ottawa Police.
Yep,
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And that as a result of the mandate coming into effect, that OPS lost around members?
I don't have exact numbers on that.
Okay. Given the staffing and resource issues that have been identified by OPS, did OPS consider waiving the COVID-19 vaccination mandates and allowing unvaccinated OPS officers to return to work?
That would be outside my purview responsibilities.
Okay. Can you confirm that prior to Superintendent Patterson's position as event commander between February the 6th and 10th, that he was working in the Intelligence Directorate?
That is accurate.
In your testimony, you mentioned that Superintendent Patterson told you on February 7th that he wanted to use public order units, also known as POUs, to clear the Rideau-Sussex intersection on February the 9th.
I'd have to refer to my notes specifically if you would. I could confirm if you'd like.
Is what you mentioned yesterday in your examination in chief.
So if once again, you're referring to a specific date. That sounds right. On or about that date. I would just want to, I would have it in my notes.
Okay. He did have a conversation with you around that time to use POUs. And that he wanted to clear out with POU action the Rideau and Sussex intersection in the same way that he used them on February 6th to effect arrest and seize fuels from protesters in Coventry. Is that right?
I wouldn't say that the conversation would be that in the same effect. They're two different operations. two different styles of operations.
That's right. The POUs were used on February 6th, were they not?
Where?
Coventry.
That would be, on or about that day, I know that there was some operation not involved in my responsibilities, but I was aware that something of that nature happened at Coventry.
Okay. Inspector Baudin testified that the use of POU action at Coventry undermined the PLT's work of negotiation with the protesters. Do you agree?
I'm not privy to all the information of what PLT was doing at the time, what the arrangements were, what the integration was. It would be hard for me to have an opinion on that.
Would you agree, though, that POU action would undermine PLT work in negotiations?
They each have their role, and integrated properly and used appropriately, they should be working in unison, if that helps.
Superintendent Abrams testified that Superintendent Patterson spoke to him about wanting to use a snatch and grab method on protesters and mentioned that that is a method used by OPS and not OPP. Is that right?
Is this something that I was privy to? Because I'm not sure I heard the snatch and grab term used. Is there notes to this?
It would only be privy to you if you listened to Superintendent Abrams' testimony last week.
I did
If
not.
you didn't, then, but is it a method that OPS use?
So a term snatch and grab under what context?
Meaning that police officers lined up on a horizontal line or in ranks in riot gear, and they snatch and grab a protester in order to place the protester behind the lines or behind the ranks to effect an arrest.
So the term snatch and grab is not a term that I am familiar with, but I do have extensive experience as a public order commander and in charge of our public order unit for 5 years, that there are arrest techniques that we use in a public order fashion that all public order units utilize across the province for effecting a lawful arrest on a public order line.
That's right. And do those arrest techniques involve the physical maneuvering of snatching or grabbing a person?
There are techniques that are going to be arrest techniques that are going to be used. And like I said, the snatch and grab is not something that I'm familiar with.
Now, I want to ask you a few questions on the phased integrated approach, the February 17th plan that you discussed at length already in your examination in chief. Could I ask the commission to bring up document OPP 401852? And could we go to page 7, please? So here you'll see Superintendent Bernier, the mission statement, and that it includes a reference to individual charter rights and freedoms. Is that correct?
Yes.
And yesterday you mentioned that the mission provides guiding principles and that respect for everyone's charter is what is with everything you do in operations, correct?
Correct.
And that in fact, it is critical that everyone understands the mission and objectives and commander's intent, correct?
Correct.
Isn't it true that not all OPS members knew of the objectives of the February 17th plan?
I implemented a measure to mitigate that well in advance, where every officer who was deployed on the ground received a sticker that went into their notebooks prior to briefing that outlined exactly all this information with their authorities.
When you say well in advance, this plan is February the 17th.
Correct. So officers briefing, there was various officers that would be briefed during the various stages of the operation as early as the evening of the 17th and into the morning and so on and so forth, 24 hours a day, where there were briefing periods where any new officer coming in for a briefing would receive a sticker that would go into their notebook that outlined the mission statement, main action plan, and their authorities.
Inspector Lucas, who testified yesterday, reported directly to you during the implementation of this plan. He reported, sorry, that wasn't phrased properly. He reported to you directly, right? Inspector Lucas?
Inspector Lucas would have reported me to me directly
Okay.
with regards to the, as the incident commander in the NCRCC.
Right. And he testified that he only knew of the concept of operation, so not even the high level or the brass within OPS understood the plan and mission, despite your sticker.
Could you please repeat your question?
Well, yesterday, Inspector Lucas testified that he actually only knew of the concept of operations and not the objectives or the mission statement per se of the February 17th plan. And so therefore, wouldn't you agree that not even the high level or the brass within OPS understood the plan and the mission insofar as the objectives?
I can't speak for Inspector Lucas, but I had an operations chief directly linked, feeding all the information as it was taking place within our operational level command, and fed Inspector Lucas with all the details of this plan. I even emailed out to every member of the Ottawa Police the mission statement and the main action plan on master distribution list, and kept everyone abreast of what was taking place through email.
Okay.
As far as the executive goes, the strategic commander involved, which is Deputy Chief Ferguson, involved all the way along and fully informing.
Okay, thank you. Could we scroll down to page 9 of the February 17th plan? There you can see that the POU operational plan is a separate plan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Could I please call up OPP 401873? You agree that this POU tactical operations plan is a tactical operations plan for the integrated public order units responding to the protest in Ottawa, right?
Can you scroll down a bit, please? Some more? Some more, please. Again, page 3, please. So from what I can see, this appears to be the plan. Without going into every single page to see, it is aligning with the plan that I would have approved.
Okay, thank you. And you agree that you were the overall event commander for this operation?
That is correct.
Who was
Oh,
the critical?
sorry, I should qualify. We were in unified command.
That's right.
So we are 3 unified commanders approving this plan and moving forward at this point. So
That's right, with Inspector
Springer, Superintendent Liu, and myself.
Yeah. And who was a critical incident commander assigned with the POUs on the ground?
There were multiple.
There wasn't one particular?
No, because of the magnitude of the event, we had to have the ability to manage multiple situations, critical incidents at the same time.
And who were the 3 reserve event commanders that you mentioned earlier?
So I would have to refer back to my notes if I could, but could I go back to my notes, please? On the 18th, probably.
I'm going to continue with the questions for lack of time. But if you can
Fair
remember a name off the top of your head, one of the names.
Well, Superintendent Mike Francis, or yeah, at the time he was Superintendent Mike Francis, OPP.
Okay, thank you. I would like to take you down to paragraph 34, the mission statement. And there it states, to ensure the removal of protesters in the area of the blockades in relation to the Freedom Convoy 2022. This will be achieved by securing, isolating, and evacuating persons within the designated blockade zones to ensure the safe detention and arrests of any participants taken into custody, ensure public and police safety. This mission statement does not include a reference to respect for individual charter rights and freedoms, does it?
This is a sub-plan. Everyone still has to adhere to the overall plan. So regardless any member still has to adhere to the overall mission statement that I've set.
That's right, but it is absent from this plan, and this plan would have been used to brief the tactical units. Is that not right?
This plan is inclusive of the other plan.
And was it used to brief the tactical units?
This plan, as well as my mission statement, which is no different than all the other officers, would have both the overall mission statement and the public order mission.
That's right, but this mission statement does miss the words utmost respect for charter rights and freedoms, correct?
It would be a duplication.
And then further down at paragraph 37, it states takedown of each location to commence in phases as dictated by the critical incident commander. Takedown of each location in effect means takedown of the protesters, is that right?
Clearing the area,
Yeah.
as well as there's vehicles and rendering infrastructure safe. And any protester who refused to leave or caused an action that resulted in arrest would be detained.
And you refer to POUs being used for kinetic action during operations, is that right?
That is a term that is used.
Would you agree that the origins of the word kinetic action means warfare and use of lethal force?
I'm not aware of that.
Now, I want to ask you about the arrests. With regards to the arrest and processing plans and the POU tactical operational plans, there's nothing that states that after police arrested protesters and told them that they were not being charged, that the police were to drive the protesters outside of the city core in the dead of winter, the biggest snowstorm in a while, as you described today, without access to shelter or transportation and telecommunications, and leave them in parking lots or other areas, correct?
Not the way I would explain it.
Are you aware that that happened?
The plans that were put in place, which involved the ability to remove protesters who were arrested, detained to a secondary processing site. There were two that were identified. One was approximately less than 10 minutes away from the arrest zone. The other one was approximately 15 to 20 minutes away from the arrest zone, where there were a full infrastructure of investigators in order to properly process, run, allow phone calls to lawyers, and where they were advised exactly of the next steps of what was going to take place. They were located in close proximity to, and when I say close proximity, maybe 200 meters from public transit and even restaurants and gas stations to be able to find their way back to where they need to go.
Well, we will most likely learn later in this commission that that is not exactly the case of the circumstances, Superintendent Bernier. Were you the one who authorized these movements?
I authorized the plan and the secondary processing site. At the end of the day, the unified command between Inspector Springer, myself, and Superintendent Liu, we would have to be in agreement. And it was the investigations branch that, along with our custody branch, that came up with that arrest and processing plan.
And you know who Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and Danny Bulford and Tom Marazzo are, don't you?
Yes.
And at no time did any of those four individuals not cooperate with the OPS?
Not to my knowledge. I have no direct involvement with them.
Superintendent Abrams testified that irrespective of the February 17th plan, that there remained integration issues between various police forces. Do you agree?
Could you repeat the question again, please?
That irrespective of the February 17th plan, that there remained communications and integration problems.
Following the 17th, I think the plan went as well as it could. In any operation comes with challenges. Operations of this size and magnitude and police services from across the province and in fact across the country all come with their own structures, their own
That's right. I'd actually like to
procedures.
pick up on that because I understand that you've gained the bronze and silver certification in major civil disorder management in the United Kingdom, and you've also trained with the RCMP and OPP. and you're just now mentioning that every force uses different structures. So is it true that every police force across the country uses different set of 10 codes?
That is a possibility, yes.
And there's also a different set of codes for major civil disorder management,
I don't know what you would be referring to there
communication codes,
with regards
and
to
managing a major incident.
There's only one set of 10 codes that we use to communicate on a radio.
I'm referring to your training in the United Kingdom.
Okay. I didn't have to use 10 codes in the United
A
Kingdom.
different set of codes are,
Terminology,
yes, for communicating.
they may have different terms that they use, but in the UK,
Okay. I note also that the February 17 plan does not include any reference to communications. Is that correct?
which plan are you referring to?
The February 17th overall master plan.
There is a communications plan.
Well, I put it to you that the only reference to communications is that at the stabilization phase, the first phase, that there would be a provision of integrated training and communications interoperability. Is that right?
So are we moving away from whether there was a communication plan? Because there is a communication plan. We can pull that up if you'd like.
Within the master plan?
It's an appendix plan.
You're talking about the command
No, a communication plan.
using agreed set codes?
There's a corporate communication as well as communication with what radio channels and radio system that we would use.
I'd like to move on to asking you some questions with regards to the POU tactical operational plan. So I'd like to pull up OPP 401873. At paragraph 7, the rules of engagement decision matrix there superseded all other police forces policies and SOPs. Is that right?
Correct.
Could we call up document OPS 3012550? I'll scroll down to page 2. It states that all police officers, including POUs, must have an up-to-date use of force qualification with the last 12 months. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Superintendent Abrams testified that a decision was made that this requirement would be suspended for the purpose of getting the boots on the ground on February 18th, and so that some officers would be beyond their qualification period of maybe over a year. Is that right?
That was under the decision of a chief of police or commissioner under the COVID situation.
But it did
where there
happen,
was
is that
challenge.
right?
There potentially were officers who would be given an exemption. And if they had an exemption, that would still qualify.
Next, it reads that every officer who draws their firearm in the presence of the public, use of any weapon or improvised weapon other than a firearm on another person, or use of physical force on a person that results in an injury to that person requires medical attention shall complete a use of force report. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you know how many use of force reports were recorded after the tactical phase?
I don't have that. We would have to then find those records from follow-up from that, but the records were kept and use of force reports were filled in.
Did you not receive an email on February 20 that only 4 use of force reports were recorded and that a number of arrest sheet didn't indicate yes or no for use of force?
Would you be able to pull up that email? Because it doesn't seem to.
Not at this time, but I can assure you that it was sent to you on February 20th. I would like to call up document HRF 401559. in the far left, do you agree that the person in green is carrying what looks like a 5.56 millimeter caliber carbine rifle with 30 round magazine capacity?
Where is this picture taken from? Do you know when? Do you know when?
It's taken February during the protests between the 18th and 20th.
Okay, this is, what is your question? Which officer?
Just having a look at the person on the far left, identifying that it appears to be that they are carrying a 5.56 millimeter caliber carbine rifle with 30 round magazine.
It is definitely a rifle, and I would say yes.
Okay, next to him is a person in green carrying a 40 millimeter multi-launcher.
That appears to be it.
The person in blue is carrying a wooden dowel styled baton.
That is correct.
And the person on the right in green looks to be carrying a .300 caliber carbine rifle with 30 round magazine capacity.
That appears right.
And would you agree that at first glance that these persons in green appear military-like?
I would not say that.
I'd now like to call up video HRF 401560. And I'm going to just warn that there's distressing images. And I'd like to pause at 0.29. All right, so do you agree that the OPS officer in this video in the back behind the ranks, the line is using what is actually the muzzle and not the butt of what looks like a 40 millimeter chemical munition launched to beat a protester with?
Not enough for me to see what exactly is going on.
But you can see that there is a police officer in the back beating a protester with a rifle.
There is not enough for me to see what is actually happening behind
We continue
bodies.
playing the video, please.
Get him like that!
Move back!
Please. What you guys are beating him? What the fuck is going on?
Now, I just have 3 further questions, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you for the time. This is going back before the invocation of the act regarding the deal, and we're talking about February 14th. So you knew that that the protesters organizers had established base camps at farms outside of Ottawa that could accommodate a large number of trucks. Is that right?
So you said a lot very quickly. So
Sorry.
I'm trying to figure out what could you just?
So in
what do you-
February,
If you could speak a little slower, it's
That's right.
maybe it's a bit like
bit too fast.
Yes.
In February, you were aware that there were base camps at farms outside of Ottawa that could accommodate a number of trucks
At what point in February are you talking about?
prior to the invocation of the act.
Yes, we were aware. So when I was involved, I was aware that there were multiple locations on the outskirts of Ottawa and actually a quite good distance from Ottawa as well.
And that on February 14th, approximately 100 trucks and protest vehicles left the downtown under the mayor's deal, and only 23 trucks moved up to Wellington, and then the remainder left Ottawa, right?
I actually have no records of vehicles leaving. The footprint did not change all that much. There was movement up onto the hill, onto Wellington. But from the information that I was receiving on would have been whichever day the movement would have taken place,
February 14th.
14th, there was very minimal departure of vehicles.
Right, but there was some, and this is my final question is but for the lack of the OPS cooperation in implementing that deal and obstruction of movement of vehicles out of the downtown residential areas at the rate that the truckers were actually moving and the vehicles moving outside on February 14th, most of the downtown, but for Wellington, would have been cleared by Wednesday, February 16th, correct?
We developed a quite robust, highly staffed with both our police liaison and our traffic unit and cleared egress routes that were going to be very well communicated with all the protesters as to if they wanted to leave for a 24-hour period. We had those routes clearly open and facilitating the departure of vehicles. They were not leaving.
Some of them did move, though. You did say that on February 14th. And had they had a bit
very
more time, they would have fully
small
cleared
number
out
of
the area.
vehicles.
But for Wellington. Thank you. Thank you for your service, Superintendent Bernier. And thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for the additional time. I appreciate it.
Good evening. For the record, Brendan Miller, I'm counsel for the Freedom Corp, which is the entity representing the protesters that were in your city in January and February 2022. So first, I want to talk to you about February 7th, 2022. And at that time, I take it that OPS was well aware of who Tom Marazzo was.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard his name. I can't speak for the entire service, just myself.
Right, and I take it that in fact, a PLT report was sent around about who are the key players and leaders within the protesters. Is that correct?
There were various reports
Right.
over the course of the,
And there was a list of whom PLT had identified as the leaders, and he was one of them. Was that right?
yes,
And in fact, in that list, it said that Tom Marazzo had somewhat control over 322 trucks. Do you remember that?
the Freedom Convoy group is how I would remember that.
Would you agree it was about 322 trucks?
That was one of them that came up on a document, yes.
Right. All right. So on February 7th, you have your PLT team engaging with Tom Marazzo. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. And you aware, and Tom Marazzo made this clear, that on February 7th, you'd lost confidence in your liaison officers in trying to deal with this?
I was not aware of that.
All right. Did your police liaison officers ever report to you that on February 7th, Tom Marazzo specifically requested of both OPS and OPP that an inspector level officer be made available for the negotiation to move the trucks because he wasn't getting anywhere with rank and file?
No, we had made arrangements for him to meet with a city official as he had requested. I don't know about the other comments that you've made.
All right. So the PLT officers that were working under you never reported that to you?
No.
All right. Now I want to talk to you about February 8th. Now, there was discussions, that was when the first discussions with respect to removing the concrete barriers, et cetera, and moving the trucks took place. It was the first attempt to clear Rodeo and Sussex. Do you remember that?
At Rideau and Sussex, yes.
Yeah. And all of the concrete barriers, both in the residential area as well as on Wellington, they were all still in place at that time?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I can't confirm that. We may have moved some. I wasn't keeping track of every Jersey barrier in the Corps.
Right. And Tom had essentially met, or Mr. Marazzo had met with these individuals from the city and from OPS to negotiate moving the trucks onto Wellington. But I understand it from your notes, et cetera, you knew at that time that wasn't going to happen.
So there was some confusion, I believe, about whether they were leaving or moving.
Right. And at no time did you have authorization from the city, not the OPS, on February 8th, 2022 to move the barriers, did you?
No. Well, we hadn't requested that yet.
Okay. So wouldn't it have made sense in trying to deal with this, to discuss with the city prior to meeting with Mr. Marazzo, that you're going to move these barriers to get these trucks out of the residential area and we're going to go into this negotiation with the plan, wouldn't have that made more sense?
Well, once we'd reached, if we had reached some sort of agreement, we had city crews available to us 24/7. That wasn't difficult to move a barrier.
Right. So, and you're aware that Wellington is well within the city of Ottawa's jurisdiction, doesn't belong to Parliament.
Correct.
Right. So at any time on February 8th, 2022, there was nothing stopping OPS in the city from moving the barriers, letting the trucks leave the residential area and letting them go onto Wellington, was there?
You're referring to Rideau and Sussex, which is
Correct.
that's not necessarily a residential area. That's a commercial area there.
Right. So you agree that there was nothing stopping you or the city or OPS from allowing that to happen on February 8th, 2022?
It could have been done, but we didn't reach an agreement and the group there didn't want to move.
I understand that may be the evidence. Where did you didn't ever hear from anyone from that group? You didn't speak to them and they didn't say to you that they didn't want to move, did they?
I had dealings up at that street. I'd been up to Rideau and Sussex during the course of the events.
Right. And did they just go and tell you, someone approached you, you're saying, and said, no, we're not moving?
They made it clear on a number of occasions they weren't too happy.
But you knew from your PLT work that Tom Marazzo had a parent control of 322 trucks. And that was on February 7th. That's in your own document.
Correct.
So if you move the barriers and the deal went through as discussed on February 8th, right? It could have been done.
I think there were some issues about whether they were leaving or moving. And I had spoke to Inspector or Superintendent Patterson earlier, and we didn't have approval to do that.
Approval.
To move west.
Okay, and whose approval did you need?
The event commander, Superintendent Patterson.
Superintendent Patterson. So you're saying that Superintendent Patterson didn't permit the February 8th, 2022 deal?
So around 1738, I have notes about that when I talked to John Ferguson, that I had talked earlier to Mark Patterson and we didn't, and the chief was involved and we didn't have approval to move west at that point.
Okay, and you said you didn't have approval. Whose approval again, was it
The event
Patterson?
The event commander.
The event commander. So you're saying that Patterson's approval was required in order to move the barriers?
Correct.
All right. Now, with respect to the February 14th agreement, if I can just have you direct your mind to that, that's the deal with the mayor on the Monday morning.
Yes.
So Mary Watson and the city manager, Steve Kay, they testified already in this proceeding that senior OPS officials were tasked to be on the ground to help facilitate the movements of trucks on February 14th. You heard that testimony, I take it?
I didn't hear that piece, no.
All right. Can you agree that you are the OPS official that the mayor and the city manager were referring to?
Is referring to me coming to the meeting on the 13th at City Hall? Yes, that would be me on the 13th. I wasn't on the ground on the 14th.
Right. And you weren't on the ground and you weren't attempting to carry out the move that was agreed to. We
were attempting. We moved 30 to 40 trucks up onto Wellington.
Right. And then it stopped.
It stopped for a number of reasons.
Right. Okay. At any time during the February 14th move, did Tom Marazzo or any of the leaders you had identified in your PLT report from February 7th say to you, we're going to renege? They didn't, did they?
No, they couldn't seem to finish the deal in the sense that there were groups that they couldn't get to move. There were groups that weren't on board.
So which groups?
There was a group on Bank Street.
Okay, but again, you were dealing with Tom Marazzo.
Correct.
Bank Street wasn't in those 322 trucks, was it?
See, that was something we didn't have. It wasn't clear who belonged to what groups, right? People didn't wear team jerseys explaining who belonged to which team, so to speak, out there.
But they were trying to do it, and we've already seen evidence of this, and the barriers weren't being moved, so they could. So
we allowed trucks.
Pardon me,
We
sir?
allowed trucks to move that agreed to move. We moved those trucks.
Okay, so you're saying that the trucks that agreed to move and go on to Wellington, you pulled up the barriers and allowed each and every one of them out of where they were and onto Wellington, and that you didn't stop anyone?
No, we didn't stop anyone on the Monday, no.
Okay, thank you.
And if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe and press that notification button to receive more information like this. You can also follow me at yellowhead.vote to stay informed and get the inside scoop. Thank you.